Hi everybody, welcome back to the Online Collections Technology Think Tank 2.0. For those of you who've just joined this session, thanks for joining. I don't know if for those of you who've just attended our last session, welcome back. Just a quick note from me before we get into this discussion on affordability. So on the left-hand side of your screen, there's lots of information about this session. It's got information on the speakers. More importantly, it's got information on questions. And throughout this session as well, I'd like to point out we'll run a number of attendee polls. So have a look at that for me. If you don't mind interacting, that'd be really good. It's feedback and the like for the event. And then, I'm going to, this session's kindly sponsored by Aspect Software. So thank you for them. So have a look at the resources tab, which is on the left-hand side, and download information about them, find out more about them. That'd be really good. So I'm going to hand back to our chair for this session, which is Vanessa Northam from StepChange, who introduced herself in the last session. So we won't do that again. But what we'll do is I'll hand over to Vanessa, and she can introduce our panelists for this session. Thanks, Vanessa.
Thanks, Colin. Welcome back, everybody, and welcome if it's your first session. So yes, affordability. We've got a really good panel for this session. So I'll ask them to introduce themselves. And I'm going to also ask them to give us one sort of astute observation over the last 12 months. The astuter, the better, if such a thing exists. So we'll start with Matt Hooper, who's the Senior Commercial Lead from Crown Commercial Services. Matt.
Thanks, Vanessa. Hi, everyone. So as Vanessa says, Matt Hooper, I work for Crown Commercial Service. For those that aren't aware, Crown Commercial Service is a procurement body procuring services on behalf of government and public sector. We're the largest procurement organisation in the UK. I head up the revenue recoveries, analytics and data category that does what it says on the tin, but oversees recoveries on behalf of external recoveries on behalf of government departments, including the Debt Market Integrator framework, the DMI framework, the DMS framework, which you may be aware of, and the forthcoming Debt Resolution Services framework, which will go live in November of this year. So key things over the last 12 months, well, where to start? I think in terms of technology, I think one of the things that I've been really, really impressed with in the market is the ability for the market to switch from office-based working to home-based working. And something that certainly is, as creditor and representing creditors, I think would have appalled a number of creditors in terms of security, performance issues, etc., etc. And to have been able to in a very, very short period of time to almost in most cases seamlessly switch to home working and continue to deliver in the way that the market has delivered has been really, really impressive for me, and really opened your eyes in terms of the art of the possible against perceptions of what is possible.
Absolutely, it was a real sort of no-go from a compliance perspective, wasn't it? You know, no compliance function or director in the country would endorse that, and yet here we are, 12 long months later. Thanks, Matt. Richard, do you want to introduce yourself and give your observation?
So good morning, everybody. I'm Richard Fenton. I'm the head of digital development for the Zinc Group. For those of you who don't know the Zinc Group, we're primarily a DCA and BPO organisation. We work heavily in both the banking and financial services sectors, utilities, insurance, and I guess we're quite well known for our deployment of digital and work in that vulnerable space, which both of those areas are growing day by day. I guess from an observation point of view, I think I'm going to stick with that technological aspect, but just take it the other way, which is we've seen a rapid acceleration of digital usage within consumers. People that were probably very reluctant to use digital channels, omni-channels previously, have been very open to that during the pandemic. And I think that's come from two things. One is as a need and a desire to engage with creditors and their partners alike, and their rapid understanding that the world is very much reliant upon digital technology in the midst of a global pandemic. Had this pandemic happened 30 years ago, I think we would have all have had a very different experience. The communication lines would have gone down. We'd have lost contact with families. We'd have lost contact with the people that we do business with. But with the advent of things like digital banking, the deployment of apps, I think we had a very different feel to this pandemic than we could have done. Maybe not even 30 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago. If you think about the advent of Facebook, it's not even 20 years old currently. So maybe even 15 years ago, we'd have all had a very different experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank goodness of smartphones. I don't know where we'd be without FaceTime and all of that. And by no means least, Alan, who is from Aspect, who's sponsoring this session.
Okay, thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Alan Trickett. I'm a solutions consultant with Aspect. So if you've not come across Aspect before, we're a contact center provider. So we provide cloud, on-premises, contact center solutions for omni-channel contact, and also all of the additional capability that goes around the contact center, such as workforce management, performance management, speech analytics, etc. So all of those capabilities, I work with both prospective new customers and existing customers to deploy that technology in all kinds of environments, collections environments, customer service environments, etc., to assist those businesses with delivering the optimal service to their customers. In terms of observations, I would say the biggest thing I've seen, or the most significant thing I've seen, is the speed with which things can get done when you need to do them. So, for example, with taking payments, going back to the compliance point, when you're in a contact center, there's a clear desk policy. The risks are minimised in terms of compliance. When you suddenly shift everybody working from home literally overnight, what I found, those particular projects, which could take several months in terms of workshops and discovery, etc., to roll out, could be done, within a matter of a few days. Perhaps a little bit longer than that, but certainly within a couple of weeks, you can deploy quite a complex project to overcome those sorts of issues.
I'm sure there's many compliance and IT teams who are dreading post-pandemic the phrase, well, you did it in the pandemic, why can't you do it now? But necessity was definitely the mother of invention on that respect. So this session's all about affordability. And if we cast our minds back just under a year ago, when Boris Johnson announced the full lockdown, and in a matter of days, the FCA and the government announced payment deferrals for mortgages, and financial services organisations had to literally overnight stand up a mechanism, whether that was telephony or obviously with the volumes, digital. And yet affordability didn't really feature too heavily in those that first wave, because there wasn't the capacity and the time to do a full affordability assessment. And yet it's the real foundation to any collections conversation. So in terms of thinking about sort of the different aspects that you present, so we've got public sector, we've got digital, and we've got telephony. In terms of technology, what's the role of technology measuring the level of affordability, and how can that technology really give us confidence in measuring customer outcomes? Who wants to start us off with that one?
I'll jump in. I think from our point of view, certainly what we've seen in terms of technology and affordability. Previously, you may have had an agent talking to a customer over the phone, asking pertinent questions and running through what would be traditionally known as an income and expenditure type conversation. And consumers are very savvy. They know the end game to that conversation is to determine affordability and disposable income to determine possibly a payment plan. So they'll protect themselves, never maliciously, but they'll tend to round things up so that they can get themselves into a safe position. But by putting technology into people's hands, so whether you deploy an I&E calculator through an app, or deploy it on a website, or just through a link that takes you through to an application that allows the consumer to do that themselves, they're able to interrogate their own finances under their own steam, under their own time, and generally they're going to give you more accurate information. because they don't feel the pressure of being interrogated by a live individual. So technology actually allows the consumer to take their time and tell their truth to their story. The one thing that we would always say to our people is that when you're speaking to people and they're telling you about their income and expenditure, if they're rounding up, it's not a malicious act. It's a self-preservation act. It's something that they're doing because they understand at the end of this, they may be committing to a payment of some sort, unless that consumer is in dire straits. And of course, you're looking at a negative position. And also the ability to deploy other things within that environment. We work with organizations like Policy and Practice, for example, to deploy things like benefits calculators. So don't just look at what your consumer can afford, give them an opportunity to find additional income to support their existence. You know, you're not necessarily looking for additional income to pay down any commitment that you're dealing with. You're looking for additional income that might help that individual pay their rent, pay a utility bill, and just get a little bit ahead that week. So it's presenting consumers with a variety of options that are easy to use, and technology really does allow you to do that. And that's something that we found.
Okay. That's it.
I think I'd echo exactly what Richard said. This is about empowering customers, consumers, and to the point already made, we've seen a significant shift in consumer behaviours. Consumers have a significant expectation of the ways they can self-serve and the channels that they can deliver. And I think it's absolutely critical that the way that we use technology is smart, but is designed to empower customers, to enable them to access the solutions they want to access. And I think one of the things that concerns me a little bit looking at the front end of the customer service is it seems to be getting harder to access that. You seem to be getting forced down digital channels. I've been talking to a number of providers, broadband and banks recently, and found it nigh impossible to actually talk to someone. Now, I definitely consider myself as someone that wants to self-serve, but I want to have that option that if I don't feel I can self-serve for whatever reason, I want to be empowered to engage with the organisation how I feel I should be able to. And that's what consumers expect. And if you want to get that repayment from a consumer, you need to make that journey as simple as possible for them. And that is about empowering them. It's not about forcing them down any one particular avenue. And obviously, to do that, you need to make sure your strategy is appropriate, to make sure that the customer knows their options and the availability of solutions that they have. So I think that's absolutely critical. In terms of the outcomes and measuring outcomes, again, I guess it depends on what you're looking at in terms of how successful that is. But if we look at things like the consumer journey, so a very simple outcome might be just understanding the breakage rate. So to the point made, if you give the customer time to get that income and expenditure correct, or give them the tools to get that income and expenditure correct, whether that is a self-service portal or open banking or whatever, you're more likely to get a sustainable repayment plan. You're more likely to see lower breakage rates. You're more likely to see more satisfied customers because they feel they're in control. So again, breakage rates are a clear indication of outcome, but also customer satisfaction surveys. I think people are often a little bit cynical about actually asking customers what the journey was. What was your experience with us? And from my experience working with a number of DCAs, it can be really, really positive experience if you get it right for customers, and customers will tell you that and will give you that feedback. So again, enabling the use of technology to measure customer satisfaction and get feedback from customers as part of that ongoing continuous improvement loop is really, really important. I think the other key outcome is obviously around the indebtedness of the consumer. So are we resolving their problems? Are we helping them to get out of their financial difficulty? And again, using technology to understand not just where that consumer journey ends, but understanding, does that consumer re-enter my collection cycle further down the line? How often am I seeing the same people is critical. And I was talking to MAPS recently about their money advisor network. understanding the journey that consumers are going through in terms of debt advice, and understanding who goes through that and how far they go through that journey is another really, really great outcome that technology can help us solve if we get it right. But I think that the key part to all of this is getting it right. It's not about having the most sophisticated technology. It's about making it simple for the consumer.
All about that customer engagement journey. Alan.
Yeah, so I would agree with that. I mean, in terms of making the journey easy or making the process easy, if somebody's gone through or attempted to go through a self-service process and for whatever reason they haven't been able to do it, they expect to be able to speak to an agent, and moreover, they expect the agent to understand why the self-service didn't work. They don't want to go through that process of explaining again what they're trying to do. They expect the agent to be able to see that and have a seamless transition from self-service through to the agent interaction and resolution. And in terms of measuring affordability, I see a lot of customers using speech analytics for that purpose, not necessarily to catch people out, but in order to track conversations over time. So if you've contacted a debtor several times over a period of weeks, you can use analytics to analyse the conversation, look for patterns in what a customer has said, what issues they have, for example, present that information through to the agent, and it then allows them to have a much more tailored conversation with that customer based upon their real experiences over time, and indeed how those experiences have changed over time as well, because your employment status could change. You could be employed, you could be on furlough, you could then find yourself unemployed. If you can catch all those different nuances, then it definitely gives you the opportunity to give a much more tailored consultation to that consumer or customer.
Thanks, Alan. So we've been talking sort of about consumers in an aggregated, amorphous mass. But what are the new types of consumers coming into collections? And what do you, in terms of the insights that you've had, what do we think the sort of expectations of consumers coming in to collections? Do they differ pre-pandemic? So, for example, I was talking to a senior leader in one of the major banks, and her neighbours, one was a BA pilot and one was a restaurateur. And clearly, as a result of the pandemic, significant financial impacts to both of those households, whereas they would never have appeared in collections before. In terms of affordability, what do you think? Do you think there's going to be different expectations of those consumers or not? Richard, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, because what we're beginning to see, and I think what we're going to see a lot more of, is two elements affecting people coming into collections, particularly those coming into a collections environment for the first time. The first is the cause of that, which is the financial shock that people are currently getting through loss of income or reduced income. We've all read the stories where airline pilots, for example, are suddenly now working for Amazon, and the difference between the two income brackets is plain to see. That financial shock has led to something else that we're beginning to see and observe much more, which is a culture shock. Whereas before, we're dealing with people that might have some experience of financial hardship, understand the process that they're about to enter in terms of collections, and almost understand the script and the nuances of the relationship that they're about to enter into when they're negotiating repayment plans, etc. There's a generation of people, and I use the word generation, it's more of a demographic of people that are coming into collections and will continue to come into collections that have no understanding. These could be high-earning professional individuals that are very good within their field, but are a loss to do now they're in financial difficulty. So they don't understand things such as the benefits system, for example. So they don't appreciate what is available to them. And they forget quite quickly that they've paid their national insurance and that they're entitled to this help. And they struggle to see it as help. Some people begin to see it as a failure or as another stress element to the environment that they're in. So collections now is about engaging with people, but also helping people understand that the process that they're about to go into is there to help them. This is collections 2021. This isn't collections 1971. So this is about finding solutions for people rather than badgering people into propositions that they can't either commit to, afford, or worse, understand. And for us, and for me, it's about giving people the information that they need. And to everybody else's point about making that journey simple and seamless, it's taking the front end of your experience when things were good, when you were making your payments on time, and taking that to the back end of the process and making it feel the same, making you still feel like a customer, that you still have this technology if you want to use it, and you still have this agent over here that will take your call and talk to you and give you information. And I think that's important to realize. And I think come September, when furlough ends, we're going to see much more of this. We're going to see people that have previously just been able to manage everything absolutely seamlessly, but because of the impact of this pandemic and the fact that it's hit industries which were previously very, very strong. We only need to look at some of the airlines, for example, that were doing extremely well for many, many years, that all of a sudden had billions of pounds worth of assets sat on tarmac doing nothing, and all of the people that were impacted by that. And the high street continues to be devastated. The high street was fragile before this. And the pandemic has not only accelerated people's understanding and desire to use technology, I think it's also accelerated other things within the economy, which were slowly beginning to crumble, which have now crumbled under huge pressure.
Okay, that's Richard. Who wants to come in next?
I'm happy to sort of dive in, and I think I echo everything Richard said. We're going to get consumers that just don't know what to expect, Vanessa, and I think that's part of the challenge. I know that I'm still going out there when I tell people I work in recoveries and I get a raised eyebrow and I have to say, hang on, it's not like that. That's not what recoveries is these days. You're going to get those people who are very, very defensive when they enter this journey, expecting to be treated as some sort of criminal in what they've done, to be at fault for what they've done. And then you're going to get a number of individuals who come in that have every desire to do the right thing, want to engage, but to Richard's point, I've never been here before. I don't have the means or the wherewithal to engage. So what support is out there? So the critical piece of that to me is around the communication strategy that we use, is around understanding those consumers almost even before they enter the cycle. So what data is available to us to understand those consumer circumstances, to understand their overarching and holistic indebtedness position, and then really making sure that the communications that we send out to them are very, very clear about the support that we can offer, about what their expectations can be, about giving them choices. And again, I don't apologize for saying it's about empowering the customer to say, this is how you can resolve this. We can give you support. We can point you to the free debt advice sector. It's very much working in partnership with those people to bust a lot of those preconceptions that may exist, and to enable them to feel comfortable about engaging. Because if you can get them to be comfortable about engaging, then that's the hard work done, isn't it? I think.
Definitely. I mean, in terms of being asked about your affordability, that can be potentially quite intrusive, right? And are the sort of BA pilots, if we're going to talk about that cohort, what's going to be their expectation? I mean, Alan, from your perspective, anything to add?
So yeah, I mean, in terms of notifying people, or informing people of what their options are, as we already said, these are people who are not used to being in debt. It's a completely new environment for them. It's they're going to feel embarrassed about speaking to somebody about debt. If you can advise them of alternative ways of dealing with it and providing them with information that initially don't necessarily mean they need to speak to somebody, maybe some kind of a visual IVR flow or some kind of self-service that provides them with information to allow them to try and recover from the situation that they're in. But again, giving them that comfort. Yes, they can speak to somebody who is not going to judge them. It's somebody who's going to help them out of that situation that they now find themselves in.
Yeah,
and I think, sorry, Vanessa, I think it's sorry to interrupt. I think that point is really interesting, is the embarrassment factor, and going back to the point Richard made. In many cases, these people won't want to talk to people. So how do you enable them to self-serve and find solutions? And that is really critical in terms of having sort of self-serve portals and tools, and they don't need to be incredibly sophisticated. They just need to be simple to use. And I've been talking to DCAs who, some of whom get this very right, and some of whom get it very wrong, and that has significant impacts on the DCA's bottom line in terms of costs, but also obviously in terms of liquidation, collections, and customer experience. And if you can enable those people some of those people just want to go online at 10 o'clock at night onto a self-service portal where I can just do everything I want. I can just take care of my situation. In my mind, it's very personal. I don't want to talk to someone. That's exactly what they want, and what we need to be able to provide.
In terms of sort of focusing purely on the affordability aspect of conversations online or otherwise, what's the sort of opportunity for existing data to play in that process to help maybe take some of the pain out of that onerous process? I mean, has anybody got any insights into examples of what people are doing in that respect? Will customers expect previous data to be taken into consideration?
One of the things that we're finding quite useful at the moment within our own income and expenditure environments, we have the ability to present to customers that are not used to going through this process and might not necessarily know what they're spending, because you quite often get this, particularly with higher earning brackets, where people are not entirely sure what they're spending on individual items. So we deploy prompts within the system, which are not national prompts. Previously, we've seen national figures. So you've got an average spend for a supermarket shop for a family of 3, which incorporates Chelsea and East Kilbride, where I live, and they're 2 very different areas. Whereas if I'm going into a system that presents the average for my particular postcode, that helps people think and inspires people to look, actually, yes, that is about right for what I'm spending. So you can use data quite cleverly in that sense to prompt people, to give them an idea of the type of expenditure they might be putting out and what they should be putting out as well. And it helps people think, actually, I was spending £500 here when the average for my region is 280. Is there something I can do to come closer to that? So these types of data sets can help in multiple ways. It can give somebody an idea of what they should be spending or what they could be spending.
Okay. Yeah.
I think the role of data and is absolutely critical. Again, it enables you to understand the consumer's position. Do consumers expect us to use data? I don't know. I think consumers expect us to know them. And they expect an individualized treatment. They get that everywhere they go. If I log onto Amazon, they know who I am, they know what I buy, they know what I like, they recommend things for me. I expect an individualized solution. So I think and the FCA are very clear about using data to support an understanding of consumers. And the data that's available now, 5 years ago was there were a few companies using it. Now is pretty standard in the market to drive segmentation, particularly around credit bureau data and looking at that. And I know through the frameworks that we deliver, we do a lot of work to understand financial vulnerability or significant financial vulnerability as part of our segmentation using that credit bureau data. But I think the other impact of COVID has meant that consumer circumstances can change overnight. So the latency of that credit bureau data, albeit maybe it's only 30 days, 45 days aged, can mean it's significantly out of kilter. So the ability to drill down into that a little bit more opens up. So start looking at things like trending data. So it might be that Matt Hooper paid his credit card bill off every month for the last 6 months. For the last 2 months, he's only paid a minimum payment. What's that an indication of? Does that indicate that there's some sort of change in circumstances that we should be aware of, and therefore we need to proactively reach out to Matt to offer him some support? Equally, then, you know, and the conversation is always going to get around to open banking and things, isn't it? And I know we've got an open banking session later, but the use of open banking is a really exciting opportunity, I think, and I know there's all sorts of caveats that are attached to the ability to use it, but hypothetically, having access to that data becomes very, very relevant because it is up to the minute data, and being able to utilize that in conjunction with credit data, in conjunction with past performance, but also future performance. And this is where I think it starts to get really exciting, is you start to look forward to say, Matt Hooper's car finance expires in 6 months. So, you know, I can see he's paying X for 6 months, but then that drops off. So there's a potential trigger to understand affordability at that point. Or Matt Hooper paid his house insurance. He pays it annually, and he paid it last month. So I know in 12 months' time that installment's going to come up again. And how do I factor that in and understand that to really get under Matt's affordability? And that's not even touching on things like the ability to have dynamic income expenditures, where you constantly look at a bank account to say, Matt's just bought a new dishwasher this month, so actually I've got to contact him to say you can't afford to pay this month. So I think that there's huge opportunities, some of which is more sophisticated than others, but I think there's and that's not, even touching on the internal data that creditors have. You know, creditors know a lot about their consumers, and very few of those actually apply that knowledge at the collections point. So how much do we know about our consumers? How much can we know about our consumers and our customers? And how do we engage with them to help that affordability journey? And then I think Richard's point is really, really good. When you're asking for an income and expenditure and you're giving them the tools, they've got no idea what good looks like, what normal looks like. So if you can give them benchmarks or indications of, this is the average spend in your area or for your demographic, it's not saying it's right, and we need to caveat it appropriately, but it gives a really good idea to you and to them of how sustainable that income and expenditure and affordability solution may be.
Absolutely, and at StepChange we've been applying that process through the standard financial statement online for some time. We've got a question here that's come in from Mike Riley from NatWest. So how do we overcome the problem that income is often relatively fixed, whilst expenditure can vary sort of plus or minus 20%? And then get surprised when payment plans break despite being affordable on average. So, Colin, from a sort of telephony perspective, how do we crack that? Alan, I beg your pardon. Sorry, Colin, I was bringing the host in. Sorry.
So I mean, so obviously I speak from a technology provider's perspective as opposed to the users of the technology, but I guess we see a lot of requests from our existing customers as to around how that kind of information can get presented to an agent. So yes, it's a constantly moving target, but the ability for the agent to have that information presented to them so that they can direct that conversation in a particular way is something that a lot of organisations are seeing and now want to act upon.
Yeah, I wonder how the role of sentiment analysis potentially in that perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so sentiment analysis, looking at trends, understanding what a customer's saying, and being able to guide that customer in the most appropriate way. Yeah.
Richard, get the names right. Room 101 of being a chair. Get people's names right.
I think one of the most powerful things you can do in relation to that, you have your fixed income, and yes, you do have that fluctuation in terms of expenditure because there's things that we can't control, such as weather, so utility bills and things like that can shoot up quite rapidly, and we can get a flat tire, the washing machine can blow up. It's about flexibility. But it's flexibility from both sides. And it's that flexibility option being presented to the customer right at the onset. So once you've engaged with the customer, whether that's through a self-serve model or you're dealing with a live agent, the customer has to be presented with the option to come back at any point and make adjustments. And they need to understand that right from the offset, because if they don't, and they break that payment plan, that's when you lose the engagement. And it's the engagement which is key. Engagement drives everything. And if the customer feels comfortable that they can come back at any point with an improved set of circumstances or a more stressed set of circumstances, the likelihood is they will. And it's also to remember that when you're engaging with a customer, that customer is going to be engaging with multiple people having similar conversations. So work on that pro rata basis with your customer. Don't go for the win. Go for something that's going to actually be feasible for the customer to achieve, and leave them with the door open. So whether that's technology saying to them at the end of a process which is automated with a simple message saying, if your circumstances change, come back and tell us, regardless of whether it's a negative or positive change, or whether it's an agent reassuring the customer at the end of that conversation, having set up a plan, if your circumstances change, do come back. And it's educating people as well. It's reminding them that things will happen. And actually not just taking the customer's word that, yes, this is my expenditure. Remind them of things like exploding washing machines, MOTs, rises in prices for utilities and things like that. So help your customer think, actually, we need to put a contingency in here. So perhaps it's better to reduce that payment plan now by 10 or 15% and get more longevity out of that rather than going for the maximum.
And do you perceive that leaving that door ajar is more effective digitally? Are consumers more likely to go, oh, I just need to update that versus I need to go through that phone call?
I think one of the things that digital does, which we've never seen previously, is the midnight call. And it's the ability for consumers to be able to put their heads on the pillow at night and sleep. And if they can't sleep, at least give them an option to get out of bed and do something so that they can go back to bed. But what I mean by that is if you present a customer with digital options at any point, even if they're dealing with a live agent, don't forget you can talk to us 24 hours. You can communicate through our web chat. You can send us an SMS. You can drop us an email, and we will respond to that within X, whatever your SLA is for responding to those particular channels. So it's allowing consumers to walk away knowing full well that it doesn't matter if it's Sunday afternoon when all of a sudden, remember, the MOT's due this month. They can drop an email into the respective creditors and say, actually, this month I need to make an adjustment. Or they can pick up the phone first thing on Monday morning. So digital lends itself very well to that, is that 24-hour ability to get it off your chest. Even if there's not a live agent there to engage with you, it's the ability to actually get the information into your creditor at a time that suits you and allows you to go to bed that night and sleep well.
Thanks, Richard. We've got another question. So hopefully one for all of you. So what would be your top 3 collections technology tools to consider that provide maximum benefit for minimum development effort? The Holy Grail.
So I guess from my perspective on those, and it impacts the previous question as well, is just use your data smartly. Understand what you already know about the consumer. Understand what data is out there that you can find relatively simply. And why does that impact the previous question? Because that trending data piece, again, it's not just about understanding your consumer circumstance when they enter the cycle. It's about monitoring that. And there's so many tools out there now that for relatively simple solutions will monitor your consumers and will proactively identify a change of circumstances within barriers parameters that you set. So I don't know, consumer falls 2 payments down on an external credit card. That sends a trigger to you, and you can proactively contact that consumer before they enter even worse difficulties or break the payment plan with you. So I think that the first one is understand the customer, understand the consumer, use the data. The second one to me is get your contact strategy right. Make that is so important in terms of your engagement with that customer. There's loads of really, really smart solutions out there in terms of multi-channel engagement, but the messaging as well has to be appropriate. Lots of people talk about behavioral insights and the opportunities that can add, and learning from those communications. So get the communication strategy right. And then the third one is about empowering the customer, is about just enabling them to choose the channel that they want without putting barriers in the way. Enable and again, the difference from the DCAs that I see, those that have an effective self-service portal versus those and a really good comms channel supporting it are seeing sort of self-cure 50% plus. Those that don't or are struggling are seeing numbers massively below that. So it's just using the tools you have smarter and enabling a really seamless, easy customer journey. And it shouldn't be rocket science if you get it right.
Thanks, Matt. Alan.
Yeah, and I would say, bringing those points together with minimal sort of cost is linking your data together. All organisations have this information about their customers, but they're in disparate systems. Agents have different screens to look at or different applications to go into. It's not that difficult really to link that information together, find out who your customer is when they call in, gather information about them, their account number or something that's a unique identifier to them, and then use your technology to pull that information to the agent. So when they're speaking to that customer, they've then got all of that pertinent information in front of them. There's no additional applications that need to be bought or technology that needs to be bought. It's just bringing it all together. Also offering new channels. Social media, I see a lot of, virtually every RFI that I respond to over the last probably 12 months or 2 years has had a social channel involved in it. People don't just want inbound and outbound voice or even SMS and chat. They want WhatsApp, for example. They want to engage by those other means as well.
Thank you. And finally, Richard.
Yeah, I think to Matthew's point, data is key. You've got to look at the data. It's not just having the data, and you've got to respond to what you're seeing. And I think for us and for anybody really, technology is in itself complicated. It's a complicated beast. So when you're putting it in front of the consumer, it needs to be simple. So whether it's intuitive to use, you don't want somebody to have to run a course to use your self-service portal before they do that. You want them to engage immediately. So you want to remove as much friction as possible and make the message simple as well. It's all too tempting when we're using digital communications, particularly email and things like that, to put a lot of information to give the customer 5 options, when in actual fact, you probably just want one, and the first is the engagement. So keep the message extremely simple and don't try and be all things to all people at once, because it's about just making it as barrierless as possible so that people can just see that you're there, you're able to communicate with them. And that's the same for any tools that you present. So if you're presenting an I&E calculator, for example, make it intuitive, make it very obvious what the next step is. If it's a communications channel, and I think that last point in terms of the omni-channel, present people with as many channels as you dare to allow them to knock on your door, because they will choose the right door to knock on. So whether somebody prefers to use WhatsApp, whether somebody wants to use two-way SMS, somebody wants to drop you an email, all of your digital channels, but every single digital channel at the end of that list needs to have one thing, a phone number, because you need to have the people sat at the back. It's a bit like the final scene of Wizard of Oz. You pull back the curtain, the technology's there, but there's a man pulling the levers. And that's what people actually want to understand. Technology is really, really useful to make engagement simple, to use it on your own terms and in your own time. But consumers want to believe that there's people sat behind that understand the problems that they're talking to you about, that are going to respond to you in a human way, not with technology. Ever let your customer feel that you're responding through data or through an algorithm. Make them understand or help them understand that you're responding to them because you've looked at the information that you've received through the technology, and as a person, you're responding to them using the same technology.
I think it's also important as well to just add to that last point around omni-channel is linking them together as well. So regardless of how someone if you contacted, by chat yesterday, by SMS, an hour later, and by voice today, the ability to bring all of that information together so that the agent, irrespective of the channel you've used, it's seamless. As far as the agent's concerned, I contacted you. It doesn't matter how I did it. You know who I am and you know what my problem is.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so we do have some other questions, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. So I'm going to ask all three of our panelists to get their crystal ball out now and give us one prediction, sort of, or hypothesis for the next 12 months. Anybody want to start us off? Related to obviously collections and affordability, and not sort of complete left field.
I think it's going to be, really exciting to see the way that technology can support affordability. I am genuinely excited about the opportunities that open banking offer. We've included a lot within our new framework for public procurement that is around affordability and monitoring, that isn't solely about open banking, because I think open banking is one part of the armory, and you need to combine that with a load of other data to understand that. But to me, if we could get open banking to be recognised, and not just a strong value exchange. I know that's really, really important, but people need to see it as the norm. At front end as well, and I see it very much like contactless debit cards and credit cards, that when they first came, no one knew about them. Then people were really cautious about them and didn't want to use them. And now, frankly, I can't remember. If someone asked me to put my PIN in somewhere, I sigh and moan and groan. But that's really exciting in terms of what technology will consumers embrace, and a lot of that will be driven by how easy we can make it for them to embrace it.
Absolutely. Alan?
Yeah, I think looking at automation going forward, I think we're only seeing we're in the very early days of automation. I don't think in a collection environment we'll ever get to the point where we have hyper automation whereby everything is automated. There is always going to be a need for an agent to be available. So to everyone else's point, at the end of the day, somebody will want to speak to somebody, or is very likely to want to speak to somebody. But I think as the technology advances, natural language understanding, for example, is already very sophisticated. You can have quite an in-depth self-service interaction using natural language understanding. And as those technologies develop even more, I think you will see more customers who want to use that technology will use it. People who want to speak to somebody will just opt out.
Yeah, great. And finally to you, Richard.
Personally, I have two things I think we're going to see, and I think it's going to roll over 2021 into 2022. And I think what we're going to see in 2021 is probably the largest movement of people coming into collections for the very first time. And I think we're going to see some quite startling numbers, both in terms of sterling and volumes. But I think equally in 2022, we're going to see the largest movement of people coming out of collections within a 12-month period. And the reason that I say that is because we're going to see that culture and financial shock hit very, very hard, probably towards the second, third quarter of this year. And then as the economy begins to rebuild, and this is going to be very interesting to watch, is the recovery of the economy, the emergence of new industries and new sectors, which are currently seeding as we speak. Let's make no mistake, there are businesses that have done incredibly well as a direct result of the pandemic. And that's not a casting aspersions on any sector at all. That's just the way of the world. And that's going to continue throughout 2021 into 2022. And we will see people emerge into other professions, other markets, and take those transferable skills. And hopefully we'll see a far quicker recovery than we would have done, say, for the credit crunch that we all remember in 2008, which was a huge impact globally, but it took us quite a while. In fact, just before the pandemic, everybody was kind of going, whew, that was a long haul. Thank goodness we've come out of that. And then...
Well, I sincerely hope you're right, Richard. I just want to bring us to a close. Absolutely fascinating range of insights. Thank you so much, all of you, for giving up your valuable time. I appreciate you're all really, really busy. And I think you've set us up quite nicely for the next session, which is on open banking. So I'll hand back to Colin.
Yeah, thanks everybody. That was really, really interesting, and I made some notes there about, you know, the really interesting stuff about the generation thing. I think that's interesting, and maybe we talk about communication, but it's not just about the channels you use; it's also the words that you're using and different. I've seen quite a lot of research around that and the language and the level of language that you use for different people, and trying to make it simple. I think there's a lot of acronyms in the industry, so. Yeah, really interesting to see how that all applies and with affordability as we move forward. So thank you very much. And of course, thanks to everybody who's tuned in and took part in our surveys. We'll be rounding that up on the site soon. And also the questions that we haven't quite covered here, we've had a couple, we'll round them up on the website as well. So that's great. So I'll round up by thanking, of course, Vanessa for chairing. We'll see her shortly on the next session, as you rightly said, about open banking, which is taking place in 20 minutes time at 5 to 12. You will need to log out of this event and then log into the new one. There's some details on the panel on the left-hand side, which tells you how to do that. So I'd also like to end by thanking Richard, Matthew and Alan for all of their insight. That was fantastic. And for those of you who join us on the next session, we'll see you shortly. Those of you have just joined us for today, then thanks. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. So thanks, everybody, and goodbye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.